Hi there, and welcome to another BigLipz podcast. This is episode 10 we're on now of our second series. So if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Sam Macaulay Blair. I'm your host this week, and I'm joined as ever by the wonderful Kathryn Maurice. The two of us are former and current film students and just general cinephiles. We had an entire series of podcasts in which we talked about movies, and now we have swapped over and we're talking about TV instead. So we basically alternate each month on who hosts and alternate each by week on whether we're doing a content episode or a concept episode. So last time we did the very divisive Legion as our content episodes, and this week we're doing our concept episodes and we're doing it on TV. Very on the nose, but figured it made sense to just get our general sort of thoughts out there. So basically structures a series of questions regarding TV, and I'll ask sort of Kathryn her thoughts and feelings on them, and then I'll probably end up rambling a lot myself. So to begin with, Kathryn, what is your definition of TV?
This is like a super interesting question because I feel like TV in some respects has like just as many kind of forms and styles and different things like that as movies do. So if I think about TV, you would think of like soaps, which are very a soap isn't something that could translate into a movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's obviously dramas, there's adult animation, which we've spoken about before. You've got mini-series, you've got docu-series. I feel like one way that I would probably define it is, like I just said, something that maybe couldn't quite be translated into film. Like there's obviously we've spoken before about TV shows that go into movies and vice versa. But in that podcast, we spoke about how they just feel different. There's a different feel to them. And when we were studying, I remember asking a particular question, like why does, for example, Downton Abbey, the TV show, look and feel different to Downton Abbey, the movie? And it's because they're shot different aspect ratios, they're shot different frame rates, even just things like that makes it look noticeably different.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point about it. I think obviously the way that we watch TV is quite unique. I've never been to an event where you would go and watch a TV show.
Really? I have.
I don't think. You have. Oh. I think by and large though, it's generally TV's more something that you would kind of watch in your own house. I feel like it's maybe even more kind of personal, maybe not more personal than movies, but I feel like there's
an intimacy.
Definitely, and there's like movies TV shows that I watch for like comfort, like binge watching and things like that, aren't going to be the same TV shows that you watch. So I feel like I feel like the way that you watch them is different. The kind of feel when you're watching them.
Yeah.
And obviously the way that you watch them, I think there's obviously loads of like the way that we watch TV has changed now, so it's all a lot on like streaming services and online as opposed to just like whenever it was on the telly. Whereas film, generally, obviously there's streaming services that do films and they're released online and things like that, and sometimes they're released online at the same time as in the cinema, which can cause some issues, as we know. So yeah, I've honestly you just spoke about yourself rambling, now I'm just rambling.
all very good points though, like all very interesting things and things that I hadn't even really fully considered.
I think one other thing I would say is I feel like historically maybe TV had much more of a visual tell, like aesthetically you could look at something and think, that's a TV show, that's a clip from a TV show, or that's a clip from a movie.
Yeah.
I feel like that's mainly, until recently, as I've seen, obviously there's exceptions and everything, but I feel like colour grading's a huge thing in film, but maybe not as much in TV. I don't know whether that's maybe because they don't have the time to colour grade it the way you would a movie.
Yeah.
So TV shows, I feel like, generally tend to be quite well lit, they're very brightly lit, there isn't a huge amount of colour grading, there's no like hues or anything like that generally, or if there is, it's from the actual lights on the set.
I feel like what you're saying just now is very like evocative of a specific era of TV, or like quite a long era of TV. And I know exactly what you mean. It was all like very brightly lit, and there obviously would have been like some colour grade, but there's not the sheen that movies have, and there's not the individualism, I guess, and I guess even in terms of, sorry to just like hijack your
Fire away.
wanted to mention it while you were on it, even in terms of like staging and like sets and stuff, I guess they just kind of feel or felt a lot more kind of stagey than like movies did. But I think you are right in the sense that it's probably all motivated by economy and trying to actually make things as like efficiently and effectively and quickly as possible so that you can churn out loads of the stuff rather than a movie where obviously you could spend 2 years in it. You could spend like 2 years doing like each episode of TV. Wild.
Exactly. I feel like the studio would have something to say about that.
Exactly. You couldn't even spend like 2 years doing a season of like something, despite the fact that like in terms of hours, it's significantly longer.
Yeah, I feel like historically as well, kind of piggybacking off that point, like historically you would watch a season of a TV show and then it would be like a year's break and then you knew that the next season was coming, which I feel like has changed. This is slightly off topic, but I feel like that's changed now so that there's sometimes years and years between seasons, which I assume we'll talk about later, but I think that's obviously just the way that TV has changed now and the way it's produced and things like that. But yeah, the one other thing I wanted to mention about like how would I define TV, and this was when I started to write this point, it made more sense, and then the more I thought about it, and we've spoken about this as well, movies have changed just as much, maybe not just as much, but movies are constantly adapting and changing obviously, and we're seeing like a crazy, especially with like Marvel movies, there's movies that focus on one story and there's like 12 to 15 of them, do you know what I mean? Where I feel like historically, obviously there have been sequels and stuff for ages, but TV was obviously more kind of focused on one kind of central story or one group of characters over an extended period of time, which I think movies, if you think about movies and like standalone movies generally, they tend to be a lot more condensed basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. I would agree. With the movie, maybe with like the odd exception of a show like 24, which I mean I've not seen 24, but obviously the whole gimmick there was that it's all kind of happening in real time, so arguably that would happen in less time than like your average movie. There are like some time jumps, but generally, like you say, TV takes place over a protracted period of time. One thing that I wanted to ask, or branch off on this question and ask you, was where does what's the parameters of your definition? Like at what point does something stop being a TV show? So for instance, if there was like a series of 8 3 to 4 minute things, like, you know, narratively designed episodes, I guess you'd say, on YouTube, would that count as TV? Would you class that as a TV show?
That's a hard one, because I did actually write about like timelines and stuff. I feel like it works the kind of other way as well, where it can't be too long or it feels like a movie. But there's TV shows nowadays where you have episodes that are an hour and a half long, or you have series finales that are 2 hours long. Like, how is that any different to a movie? Like, it's just like a mini movie within the wider context of the TV show. But in terms of like a really short thing, I don't know how I would define that. I'd probably just define it as like a web series.
Does platform matter then? Does that affect it? Like if that exact thing existed but it was on Channel 4, would it count?
I would probably define it more as like a short or a series of shorts. I don't know if I would define it as a TV show. Would you? What are your thoughts?
To be honest, it's like opening Pandora's box, that question, because the more I'm thinking about it, and when the things you were saying as well, are making me think of like just examples. Because I would kind of say you get like web series and they're kind of different to TV series. But I was thinking, just remembered there, so Star Wars, which we are aware of.
Yep, I've heard of it.
They have like an animated series called The Clone Wars, the sort of 3D animated one that ran for like 7 seasons, I think wrapped up a couple of years ago. But before that, in between episodes 2 and 3 coming out in cinemas, they did an animation. I think it was by the guy that did like Samurai Jack. Not just him, obviously. There was many other people working on it. But he's kind of like credited as like the sort of lead visionary of it, and it very much is like that sort of style. Not less than Samurai Jack. And yeah, I think when they released it on DVD, they released it in like 2 halves, and it's just like Clone Wars Part 1, Clone Wars Part 2, and it's just this like sort of almost like it flows as if it's like one continual story, but it's jumping between like these like almost like vignettes. There is like some through lines with obviously your main characters like Anakin and Obi-Wan and stuff like that. But when that was originally, the way that was like premiered to the world was on TV, but I'm pretty sure it was like the episodes were like 1 minute to 2 minutes long. I think it was like Cartoon Network or something that ran it, because I only saw like 1 or 2 episodes at a friend's house, and I remember just being like, what? That's it? Like, it was like ridiculously short. And yeah, just like, I'd almost forgotten that they did that, because now to me that thing, I think I had the DVD of one of the parts, and I would just watch it as like one thing. And it does work as like one sort of flowing thing, but it just, obviously the way that it was designed, the way that it was broadcast, the way that it was first ingested was like independent segments. So yeah, would you say that counts as a TV series?
I don't know. Do you know, when you were talking about that there, I was thinking, and I don't know if this is the case, but from my memory, watching Wacky Racers, in my head, was that really, really short episodes?
I actually don't know, because I was very young when I watched that, and I only can remember like flashes of it, but I think you might be right. I think it might have been like...
That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, that it was almost like, you know how in The Simpsons when they watch an episode of Itchy and Scratchy and it's literally like 10 seconds long.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I remember Wacky Racers being, but I can't remember for sure.
I feel like it was, because I can't think, like, again, I couldn't even like tell you the plot of a single episode. I think Top Cat might be the same actually, and things like that. Or like, that might be different.
Or like Roadrunner.
Yeah.
Remember different things like that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they maybe had episodes that were like lots of mini episodes in them, lots of mini stories, or if they literally would just run them at independent slots and it would just be like a couple minutes. Because I can't imagine like a Wacky Racers episode being like 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
They'd be really stretching, pulling that one out.
Yeah, that's true. So it's weird, because I don't, now that I'm thinking about it, would I class Wacky Racers as a TV show? I don't know. I feel like it's a really weird, it's a super interesting question, but I feel like it's such a hard one to define, because do you know what I mean? You can get like micro short movies that are like a couple of minutes long, and they're like short films.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it would almost come as like, you'd almost give a disclaimer. If you ever talked about it, you would be like, Wacky Racers is this like really short. Like, I can't imagine you ever just talking about it in the vernacular that you would talk about like The Simpsons and other maybe like animated shows without actually making a point of saying. Like, I feel like you would always almost mention the fact that it was like shorter, in the same way that I guess you might, like, you're talking about longer sort of shows, and I guess we kind of have done, haven't we? I think we've mentioned Sherlock before, and I'm sure I've like made a point of saying it is a much longer, like, your episodes of that are much longer, and I think most of the times I talk about that show, especially if it's someone that doesn't really have an awareness of it, hasn't really seen it, I'd always say, yeah, the episodes are like mini movies basically.
That's an interesting example as well, because it played originally, I think, on the BBC, which doesn't have ads in between them, so it would run as a full kind of, however long it is, 90 minutes or whatever, which would, if you're going time wise, it could be defined as a movie. I think the difference is obviously the kind of overarching story that kind of goes through that, like the whole kind of story, and I just feel like it's different to the way that movies have sequels. It could be potentially just the timeline, the way that TV's turned out quicker than movies. I don't know. I think
your expectations are different when you go into it. I think watching an episode of Sherlock, I think because you know as well that they're releasing like episode blocks of, there'll be 3 episodes, and you're gonna have like one episode one week, one the next, one last week, and think as well there'll be like a specific like this one is like the opener, this one's like the sort of mid one, and this one's the finale. And maybe they will kind of like generally resolve things, but you do kind of expect there'll probably be like lingering plot threads. There'll probably be like some teases at things to come. And I guess you also just know that like they'll connect maybe more seamlessly because they've been made all at the same time. So it's not like when you watch a movie and then you watch it, obviously you do get movies that are filmed back to back, like Back to the Future 2 and 3, but they obviously film
I was thinking Lord of the Rings as well, because they're very connected, like, between the movies.
Yeah, but I guess they could do that because they had obviously the books. Like
the source material,
Yeah, the only other example of something doing that on like the scale of Lord of the Rings without like pre-existing source material. I know Back to the Future didn't. They did it with 2 films, but obviously there were 2 sequels. And I guess this example are sequels, but they've upped Lord of the Rings and the Avatar films that are coming out.
Oh God!
So there's 4 of them in development, which I think because people don't really care about Avatar that much, that's why everyone kind of has that reaction. It's just like no, there's not really like a thirst for those amount of movies in that particular series.
Yeah, maybe like 2 years after it first came out. Do you know what I mean? When people were still loving it, like wow, that's the best movie I've ever seen. But
to be honest, I think if it was just Avatar 2, I think if you just announced Avatar 2 and that was all that was coming, I think there'd be a lot more hype. We have to derail this slightly.
I know.
But it's just suddenly like ranting about James Cameron's Avatar movies. Just the point was like that is maybe the closest thing where you have like 4 movies that have been like built together, and I guess be interesting to see how that informs people's expectations, because like I said, I guess like I started to say there, like if you'd just been doing a second film, I feel like there'd be a lot more hype around it, and I feel like people would be a lot more like, I don't know, not even optimistic is the right thing to say, but just a bit like everyone's reaction to all the Avatar sequels does seem to be a bit like, oh for God's sake.
Yeah.
I don't think I've literally ever in person spoken to someone about them and they've gone, oh my God, I can't wait for Avatar 4.
I'm so buzzing for all 4 of them.
Yeah, or Avatar 5 even, that's it. I think everyone's kind of like, oh, we'll see how the next one does. But I think it'd be interesting to see if like going into the film, if it is something that like impacts the way that people view it and the way that it's like sort of digested, and it impact the way that the movie stands. Like, will it feel like an episode of Sherlock on a grander scale, or will it feel like because even like Lord of the Rings movies are more like standalone films. Yeah, so I think that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, sorry, we got like way off. Well, not off topic, but I did
just slightly to the left of topic.
yeah. But sorry, would you say platform matters? Because YouTube did do their own, like the Cobra Kai I think started on YouTube because they had like YouTube Red or whatever it was. So they did try their hand. Yeah, they did try their hand at being like a streaming platform, and I remember watching, it was like a YouTube channel I watch, Funhouse, and they talked about the fact that, and they were huge Cobra Kai fans, but they talked about the fact that like they really struggled to watch Cobra Kai, not because they were massive fans of it, and not because they didn't pay to be on YouTube Red because they work on YouTube, so they have YouTube Red, but they said there's just something in their brain that wouldn't ever go, oh, I'm going to like put something on, and then you go to YouTube for like, because people do that, I feel like they go, oh, I'm going to sound something to watch, and you open up, there'll be like a streaming service that I think you open first, whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or Now TV or Disney Plus or any number of them. I feel like there's one that people go to, and then there's probably like a second one that people have that they maybe check, and a third, but there is like, there are limits to that. You don't actually check everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. I would only really check YouTube for maybe like older TV shows, like just like ones that, like that you want to watch for like nostalgic reasons.
Yeah.
You'll check it on there just on the off chance, but it is just on the off chance. Like you're saying, I would never think, I'm struggling to think of something to watch. Let's go on YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think streaming, I think platform is a difficult one because I think, obviously, I think we'll kind of speak a bit about this later, but obviously the way that you've watched TV has changed. It used to just be on the telly. Like, you would just watch it on the TV. It wasn't on demand. It was just like what time it was on. So yeah, I feel like it's obviously changed now because there's so many different streaming services, and there's stuff that are only on streaming services, but they also do movies and things like that as well. So it's not like I haven't done any research, but I'm struggling to think of a streaming service that just does TV shows. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I don't think there is any. I think there maybe ones are. There's maybe like smaller ones. I don't even know if there's. Maybe something. I don't know if this would even. It would count, but I don't know if it would count because I don't think technically they produce any original content. But you have something like BritBox, which I don't have.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that is just like a collection of British like TV shows. Like I know like classic Doctor Who's on it. I know like Press Gang and stuff are on it. I don't think they have any movies on it. I don't know. I have not checked at all. But again, I think they just use BBC content. I don't think they actually make. I don't think they fund anything. So that technically is one, but at the same time, I'd say isn't. But I think like in terms of like actually producing just TV, I think that. I guess that's just now not. Because we're probably never going to go back to that, are we? Having things that just, having like a platform that just does TVs. Are there any that just do movies? Shudder?
I'm not sure if they do shows as well. Could be just TV, just movies.
Yeah, so you do get the opposite, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's funny as well, like because the way that we watch TV now, if it's produced for and by a streaming service, it won't have ads, and so you watch it in chunks. You binge watch it, like that's an expression now that you binge watch things. So you could watch like 4 hours worth of a show, but you don't have any time to watch a movie. I always think that's really funny.
No, I know what you mean. It is funny how it is weird how that is. There's just like a psychology there. People will watch more episodes of a show than they would watch a movie, but for some reason it just didn't. And I guess it's probably like if you watch a movie, you know that you're sitting down to watch like 2 hours of something.
Maybe that's part of the definition of TV. Like I came home and I watched 2 episodes of a 45 minute show when I could in theory have watched a movie in that time, but in my head I wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, I've got time to stick a movie on. Like maybe that's part of the difference between movies and TVs. Like TV feels a bit more like we were talking about at the beginning, like
spontaneous.
Yeah, or just more relaxed. I feel like I would be more inclined to sit on my phone watching TV than I would be to watching a movie. Like it's background noise is bad because I do watch stuff for background noise, but also there are TV shows that do warrant all of your attention. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know exactly what you mean as well. Like, I guess because you know it's longer, so you know that like movies are so. And probably I'm encroaching on like other parts of the podcast here, but like they're so sort of contained and condensed, and they have to like set up everything and pay everything off in like such a small span. So I guess you do really have to kind of pay attention to movies, especially if they are these days like short, like an hour and a half. You are expecting like, okay, this is going to do a lot in not a lot of time. But I guess that's again an example of like, you know, if you watch an episode of Sherlock, even like the first episode of Sherlock, it has like a payoff to that individual story, but it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to like, and there are like character arcs and stuff in it as well, but it doesn't have to like close the book on those characters. It doesn't have to leave you thinking, okay, if there was never another episode of Sherlock, then I feel like I've seen the story. So yeah, I guess there is like, just feel like, I guess it's kind of safer if you miss parts of it because you know that, okay, like in the grand scheme of things, that like, conversation that you just had your phone out over, it's probably not going to matter that much. So yeah, I guess moving on a little bit, what do you think then that TV does better than other mediums?
So basically, just go off of your point there, I would say that the fact that TV has so much time is like such a massive benefit for it because it's got much more time to like expand on characters and plot points. I think obviously in the pilot they've got a lot of work to do because they need to set everything up. They need to within like a much shorter period of time, so it could vary between 20 minutes to like 45 generally. And in that time they need to introduce their key characters, their setting, the kind of plot points, unless it's Legion and then they just fire wherever they want in there. But yeah, so they need to introduce all these things and get you invested in that first kind of um half an hour, 40 minutes type thing. Um, but I feel like over the course of the TV show, they've got a lot more time to develop the characters, to kind of, even just I think as a writer, like obviously TV would be written differently to movies. The movie would be written as a whole, and then shot. Whereas TV obviously is you're continually writing. In most cases, I would say. So I feel like that would give the writers time, as I say, to kind of like expand on the characters and to kind of it almost gives them time for a little bit of feedback as well from fans and things like that, so that obviously they're not always going to do what the fans want, but sometimes fans have better theories and ideas than the writers do potentially. So it would be interesting, I feel like, as a writer to do that, to see, because it's always good to get feedback. So getting feedback from people that are actually watching it and enjoying it would be really good. So yeah, I feel like it's got a lot more potential to be a lot more in depth in cases, and a lot more in depth for a lot more characters. Like TV shows are often you've got big ensemble casts, so they have a lot of time to like go into each character and different stories and things like that. Um, and then kind of expanding on that point again, I feel like a fan base is a bit of an odd point, but I feel like it's quite interesting when you think about TV, because I feel like with TV, obviously it's the same with movies, but with TV, like some TV shows, those fans are like hardcore fans. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yes.
yeah. So they're gonna like they're gonna watch the next season because it's the next season of that show. Do you know what I mean? Like, once you've got your fan base for that show, generally they're gonna stick with it. Like even if they're not particularly enjoying it. So, for example, Game of Thrones. Um, so I enjoyed it in the beginning, and then it started to kind of dip, and I was like, well, the start was really good, so I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
And then this seems like a weird point to be an advantage because it seems quite sneaky. But by the time we got to the last season, I was over it, but I've still watched it because I'd invested so much time. Do you know what I mean? Which probably isn't the way that you want to get your viewers, but I feel like financially that probably works in their favor.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I completely agree. Like, I think we all have, like, everyone has a TV show like that, where they, yeah, where they have stuck with it through periods, like extended periods of time where you aren't really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And at least not anywhere. It probably makes you angrier than it does make you like content or happy. And it is a really weird like dynamic to have, because you wouldn't have, like you say, you wouldn't really do that with movies. Like, I don't think you would make the effort of going to see, like, Harry Potter. I was a huge Harry Potter fan growing up. Read the books, obviously saw the movies. Like, got the last book at like midnight. Went to see the last movie at midnight. The Fantastic Beasts movies. I saw the first one in cinema. There was no rush to see it. The second one I didn't even bother to see it in cinema. I think I watched it.
I genuinely still haven't seen the second one because I'm just like, nah.
I watched it out of a morbid sense of curiosity because it was getting like a lot of like flack, and I also watched it very early on into the lockdown, which is a lot about like why I watched it.
Yeah.
And the third one I made a point of not seeing because it's just like I like actively am now pushing against, and there's obviously these reasons out with the storytelling that affect that as well. But like at the same time, even if those reasons didn't exist, I probably still wouldn't go see the film. I just don't really, I don't have like the enthusiasm. But again, it's weird because like I would probably watch a season of a show, which again is a lot more investment and a lot more like. And I guess I don't know. I guess like maybe it's like you feel like there's a bit more hope with a TV show, and I guess it's because there's multiple episodes, and sometimes you can have like a sort of, sometimes like a season finale will let you down, but you hear things about where the next season's going, and you might get interested, or maybe like a few episodes in there's like a development and that sort of changes things up. Like you never really know what's going to happen with the TV show. A lot happens over the course of a series, and I think sometimes you do just get like great episodes out of nowhere, and I think it happens often enough in TV that it does actually make you kind of go, you hear people talk about TV shows and they'll be like, oh yeah, those like there's a few seasons in there that like it really kind of like drops the ball, but then it does get good again.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? And I guess, like you say, part of it is because it is reactive. That probably is why that happens. Is because like the people making it generally will be like, okay, like why is what are the issues people are having and how do we kind of fix them? Not always, but like I do feel like that is something that happens, and I think that probably is why. And I guess like I feel like TV can kind of take more chances. Again, Legion is an example of something that is just totally different, and it can be totally different week to week as well. And it has the sort of freedom to do that, because like I guess people will tune in. A good example is something like Buffy, as well, where they have episodes that really like break away from the mold. They try and do something different with like individual episodes sometimes, even though there is like overarching storylines and character arcs and stuff. They do have these like standalone episodes that where they're like, okay, let's actually let's have one where like no one can talk, let's have one that's a musical, and it's just things like that they wouldn't be able to do that for a film. They'd never take that kind of chance. But they will do it for an episode, because like even if people don't like it, they'll probably come back for the next one, especially if it's back to what they sort of know and love, and it's generally word of mouth is good.
I think that's such a good point, because there are, like, as we've kind of spoken about it before, where obviously we've spoken about musical episodes, where there's like these kind of standalone episodes, and they almost like break the monotony, which I feel like sometimes TV can slip into. There's a lot of TV shows that are very formulaic, and they get very, very boring very quickly. So I feel like that's like episodes like that are such a good way to kind of break that, and you can't really do that in like a boring movie, like you're saying. You can't just, well, you could, I suppose, just have a random musical number or muted scene, but it would be a lot more. I feel like it would be a lot more jarring in the movie.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot less effective as well. I don't think you would be as like wowed by it. Maybe I mean Wall-E. I remember Wall-E coming out and there being like hype around the fact, and I love the fact that like it was the opening 15 minutes or so. There's like no dialogue. I don't think that was just basically like almost like an episode of a TV show in which no one speaks. And that is it's all like the setup and stuff as well for the characters and the sort of world, the main character and the sort of world, and the tone and everything. But yeah, I don't think it's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that film. And granted, maybe like those one-off sort of episodes, I don't know, because I feel like those are, and I guess that's just because they're so popular and so well done. Those like sort of like quirky, risky episodes, but I feel like they come to people's minds a bit more than like those moments in films.
That's a good point.
That do something different, and I think it is just because it like you kind of need to do it for the entirety of the one narrative rather than just doing it for part of it. Otherwise, it doesn't really feel like it counts. So just to wrap up this point, are there any like genres that you think TV does better than movies?
Ooh. Yes, and it's purely because I'm rewatching Grey's Anatomy. Medical drama is done.
Okay.
It's made for TV. They've got shows like Grey's, shows like ER. There's a lot like Chicago Med, which I haven't watched because I think it's like down here on the scales. But that's something that you couldn't really have a movie about. It would probably be more of like a documentary feel.
Yeah.
I can't imagine some event taking place within a hospital that would last an hour and a half. Like, I'm sure there would be, and you could make something of it, but I feel like it works better in TV because you can, for example, in Grey's you can see the growth. So they start as interns and then they're going to be going on until, I'm sure, Meredith's an old woman. So yeah, I feel like that kind of, it's very like high intensity. It as well can get quite formulaic. But I feel like it works with kind of medical shows because you can just chuck whatever kind of weird, horrible injury.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I haven't really watched a lot of like sci-fi TV, but I feel like it could work. Obviously, there's shows like Star Trek and Stargate and different things like that have a similar kind of thing where there's so much scope because it's in space or
Yeah.
because it's like supernatural, there's so much scope to just do whatever you want. Whereas if a sci-fi movie was let loose like that without any kind of contained story or plot, it would just feel like a mess. Do you know what I mean?
It's interesting you say that, because the third of the newer Star Trek movies, Star Trek Beyond, was praised, and I guess it didn't do amazingly financially, but it was praised critically, and I really dug it for feeling like an episode of Star Trek, for feeling like lower stakes and more just sort of disposable, not as like grandiose. It was that was one of the reasons it was kind of like praised, but you know, it was the last one that we've had. There's not been a Star Trek movie since, so maybe that says a lot about the way that it was kind of like received by a wider audience. But it's interesting. I would actually go the other way, and I would say I feel like we're not quite there with the money and the effects.
That's a fair point, because I've seen like adverts. I can't remember what the show is called, but it just looks awful. Like it looks like it's in somebody's garage with a green screen kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's such a good point, actually. Yeah.
But funnily enough, I would argue fantasy is different, and I guess it's because you can get away with using maybe like realistic places, castles, and woods and stuff like that a little bit more. But I feel like fantasy almost does suit it, and I guess because it's a bit slower. Whereas sci-fi is more like sort of quick, and you're jumping from worlds and there's aliens everywhere, and you kind of have the same kind of things in fantasy. But I do feel like because you're going by horseback, you're not going to be
walking.
Like, yeah, exactly. There is like a slower pace, so you can kind of that kind of fits the limitations of TV a bit more. Last one I would say is I feel like comedy is better done on TV, and I think the reason for that is I think one of the worst things that happens in comedy films is they have to wrap everything up, and I feel like comedy films usually sort of drop the ball in the ending, whereas like sitcoms in particular, they just like anything can happen at the end, and you know it's going to reset for next week. So I feel like in that respect, TV has the advantage.
Definitely.
So to go back a little bit, obviously we were just discussing sci-fi, and just to kind of expand on that a little bit more, what do you think that TV doesn't do as well as movies? Like, are there genres, are there like just generally fundamental things that you feel like it sort of fails at where movies succeeds? Or other mediums, it doesn't have to be movies. Don't know why I'm singling out films.
I feel like we've kind of touched on it briefly. I feel like TV can at points have issues with pacing, and that's just because like it's a pro and a con, the kind of element, the fact that they've got so long in which to tell their story. I feel like TV shows, maybe not as of late, but like historically tended to just like they would build throughout the entire season, and then they'd have a massive big episode at the season finale, and then they would have a massive big episode 1 of the next season.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of, that's fine when you're like binge watching it, but I feel like when you were watching it at the time as it was airing week to week, you generally had to sit through a fair few kind of boring episodes, or like very, I feel like TV, sorry, this is a different point, but before I forget, obviously when TV was aired on TV, it would be episodic, so it would be weekly generally. So I feel like TV has to constantly remind the audience of what it's already seen. I feel like a lot of TV shows are quite bad for that. Lost was always quite bad for it. Grey's is quite bad for it, where at the beginning, when they have a previously on Lost or whatever, it's like, oh, remember this character that we saw very briefly 7 seasons ago? Remember them? And you're very much spoon-fed with TV at times, I feel. Again, there's exceptions. Legion is an obvious one. But I feel like that's a bit of an issue, and that's kind of relevant as well. We'll touch on it later, but with like ads and stuff like that, especially if you've watched something that's meant to be, or that was originally aired on the telly, and then you watch it on a streaming service. I've always felt Buffy was quite bad for it. You would get to the point where it was clearly the break, and then you would go back after what was the break, and then there would be 5 minutes of recap for what was before. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But if you were watching the whole episode as a winner without any breaks, it would be Xander saying, oh, Buffy, you'll need to go and do this. And then a break, and then it's like, Yeah, Buffy, as I was saying, you'll need to go and do this. Like, it's...
Yeah, that really stood out to me, and it's interesting because it took me a while to kind of notice it, just because I obviously remember watching. Weird to say I remember watching TV like that, but I just
yeah, it's weird that like I feel like there's people out there like that wouldn't have experienced that, or even wouldn't have experienced like I remember when Sky became a thing and you could pause the TV and that was like crazy. Like
yeah.
I remember before that and you just had to sprint about the joint to to get a drink in the break or to come back to make sure you were on time for the telly. Like I remember sometimes the panic if you were out somewhere and you were like, oh god, that starts in 10 minutes, we need to hurry up.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I remember that. The absolute, yeah, the tension of like, oh my god, the show starts at this time.
Yeah,
Being
because
stuck
you
in
wouldn't
like,
you wouldn't get to see it like again. Like it wasn't reruns were only a thing like 10 years after the fact. Do you know what I mean? Like
exactly,
it's
yeah.
so funny the
Or
difference between now and then.
even just like, even like the shows that I like and have liked, and they, you know, sometimes they'll repeat the episode the next day, especially if you're young. That's a very long time to wait to watch like your favourite show.
Yep.
And it's that infuriating thing of like if you miss the first 5 minutes, do you just grin and bear it and watch it, or do you hold off and watch the whole thing properly? And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that like aspect of TV is now gone, and will just be gone forever. Which you could argue is a good thing, but there was something exciting about like the event of TV, you know, because it is a thing now that like shows drop on particular days, and there's hype around that and discussion and stuff like that. That still happens, but you don't have like the time anymore. And you know, there will be a time that like an episode becomes available. There will be like, you know, some obviously shows. There are still terrestrial shows and stuff that will broadcast things, and they will have a time. I actually watched something. I don't think I actually watched it live, but I went online to find it like a minute or two after I knew it started airing, so that I could watch it as soon as possible, basically. And yeah, it is interesting that like that is just gone. That like whole thing of like you need to be in front of your TV at that particular time.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well, like there's a lot, for example, Netflix does it as well, but Disney Plus is one that it seems a bit more obvious that there's a lot of shows coming out now that are coming out weekly. And it's bizarre and like almost jarring because we went through such a long period where shows came out, they just released the entire season and then you could sit and watch the whole season, but then they're starting to kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series obviously is coming out every week. So I think that's funny that they've almost like trained us into binge watching things, and now they're taking it away from us. They're like, no, you can only watch one episode at a time. It's bizarre.
It is, yeah. It's weird that they've like reinvented the original format now.
Yeah.
I know there's a regression in a sense, which is yeah. There's something like interesting about that. I guess like are there any other ways in which you feel like TV does suffer?
I feel like I will argue that I feel like TV can tend to be more about financials than maybe movies. Not all movies, obviously. There's movies that are very much just made for money, made to make money. But I feel like we've kind of touched on it. TV shows are reliant on people watching so that another season can be greenlit. So I feel like they maybe kind of don't want to, but they're maybe not as adventurous maybe as they could be, because there's always that fear of what if we get cancelled. Whereas I feel like if so my argument was kind of like I feel like there's not as many, there's a lot of like indie films out there. Obviously generally people don't tend to see them, or if they do see them it's maybe more people who are really into film and things like that go out of their way to see them.
I think you probably will have like casual moviegoers that will see the odd indie film, but it will be, I assume it will probably be like they'll see maybe one every year, every other year, and it might not even be as it comes out. It might be on TV or just on a streaming platform, and there's not going to be a wide pool of audience. It's not like if you're a mum in her 40s and you work 9 to 5 and you maybe go to the cinema like a couple times, or a few times, maybe the cinema like once a month or something. I don't know why I got this like person. I don't know her lifestyle. But like what I was gonna say is like, take another mum with the same kind of life. She probably wouldn't pick to watch the same indie film at the same time.
Yeah.
But they might both go see the latest big event movie, probably because of the kids. But as a result, you don't really have that same. There's just not that same appeal, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like that's like there's not. I obviously it's very difficult to pitch a film, but I feel like it would be, because a film is just the one standalone thing. It might be easier to pitch that than to pitch a 12 episode TV show.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day.
Yeah, and even pilot episodes, which obviously the idea of them is like you have like a smaller version that you then ship and try and gain interest, and you do have pilots. Even like the Game of Thrones had a pilot. I think they spent like 30 odd million on the show just got completely binned, and that's they would have had like so much prep and pre-production done for the other episodes. Despite maybe not having filmed it, they would have still had like loads of things in place. Obviously, you have your cast and everything, but then just like falls apart. So even there's money spent in advance on stuff, something that then doesn't get picked up. Whereas again, you can get that with movies. You're not necessarily you're never going to have a movie. Well, I say never. Like there's always an exception to the rule. But generally, you're not going to have like an indie film where they've already got like the sequel halfway through like development, and they're just waiting for this one to make some money before like they can continue doing it. Like it doesn't really happen the same way. It's a really interesting point because you don't really get like indie TV shows.
Yeah, and I feel like we've spoken before, obviously there's TV shows that just roll on endlessly because obviously they're making money, and I feel like TV shows that go TV shows that go on like that tend to, like, the quality for me anyway tends to dip.
Yeah.
Because maybe the creator or the writer has left the project, maybe they're not kind of like passionate about it anymore. If you had to write the same thing for like 20 years, I imagine you would want to move on to something else. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's it. Yeah, it kind of they become entrenched by it, and then they become like bound to it, and they kind of want they have a yearning to go off and make other projects. And it's not that they don't love that show, but maybe some like 10 Apart would do them both some good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does happen, and people come back. But I think then sometimes you have wobbly seasons of a show because like the lead creator has left, and then sometimes they come back and it gets better again. But one thing I was just sort of came to mind there is, I guess, like one of the big differences is it's changing now again with like with streaming and that sort of thing. But historically, you wouldn't have movies made by the distributor or produced by the distributor, whereas you do have TV shows produced by the distributor. The HBO, for instance, they're looking for product so that they can sell their entire channel. Whereas Universal aren't looking for X amount of films so that they can sell their production company, or like they don't have cinemas that they need to like run movies in all the time. They
That's
run
a really
movies
good point,
based off of like when that's why you get like quieter periods in the year and like certain types of movies that you get some blockbusters and stuff like that, because there's points that are proven you will get more money, or you can make more money from those like particular times of year and markets and stuff like that. So I guess that's one of the big differences. Just to kind of wrap up on this point, are there any other genres that you think that TV doesn't do as well as movies? Obviously, we talked about comedy being one that I personally think TV does better than movies, and I think fantasy can be done better in TV. I think there's more scope for it to be done better. But I would say sci-fi at the moment is the opposite. Are there any others that you think maybe TV does worse?
I'm trying to think. I feel like generally, I feel like if something was maybe like, I'm trying to think. Do you know, like, there's a very specific type of like drama movie where it's leaning kind of towards indie. I feel like that's just not going to work for TV because those movies can be a little bit boring. And then TV's got the whole thing, you need to sustain your audience for a longer period of time. That's not going to work for people that do you know what I mean? Like if things are just
Yeah.
boring. Like I've seen plenty of dramas that are good movies, but they're pretty boring. Do you know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
getting to the point where you watch it and you're like, there's only so much I can take of this, like, and then it ends. But with the TV show, it would just continue. Um, One though that I think is an interesting genre that I think works really well for TV and movies would be horror.
Interesting, because that was going to be my counter to comedy. Is
Oh yeah.
I think movies do horror much better than comedy. Than sorry, my brain's fried. I think movies do horror better than TV shows do. Just in my experience, I've always kind of yearned for like better horror series and I guess more like good horror series. I feel like there's a lot more great horror films than there are horror TV shows, and there's great horror TV shows out there that I haven't even seen. But I think part of it is, and it's weird because I will flock to horror movies, but I wouldn't necessarily do the same. I always have an interest, but I wouldn't necessarily like rush to see a horror TV show the same way. And I think it's because of the length. I feel like over like a prolonged period of time, especially if you have a recurring cast, the stakes are just inherently lowered.
Yeah. And the tension kind of dissipates if you're taking breaks, basically. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I feel like that is more true kind of historically, but I feel like there are TV shows coming out now that are just very good and very scary. So I think maybe you're right, but I think it's definitely going in the direction where it could there's a lot of scope for, and horror's obviously having like a resurgence at the moment. We've done a video essay about that before. So yeah, I feel like time is right for horror TV shows to come out and prove you wrong, Sam.
I hope so. I think the advent of miniseries and stuff I think is perfect for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess moving on then, we kind of touched this already. How do you view TV compared to other mediums?
I think there definitely used to be a lot more of a kind of stigma attached to TV, and I think that's potentially because of things like soaps, which are very much kind of easy watching. They're very formulaic. I mean, if that's what you're into, soaps are perfect. Do you know what I mean? They're on like every night. They're half an hour long. They're perfect little kind of chance to like relax and after your day or whatever. But I feel like soaps are maybe not the most. Yeah, do you know what I'm trying to say? And I feel like that was kind of where the stigma came from. There's it's almost like if you can't make it into movies, you can be in a soap, or you can. A lot of like movie actors started in soaps, so I think there was that kind of like, oh, that person's made it now that they're in a movie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say, sorry, just to sort of latch on that point. I think there was a theatricality to TV.
Yeah.
In older days, and you get that with soaps. And we kind of touched on it before with like the sort of sets, and I think it's because obviously they build sets, and then you're going to have these characters coming in and out, and especially like something like maybe sitcom where you have like a live studio audience. There's like an artificiality to the house sets, and you know that those characters are going to be there a lot and everything, and
yeah, that's a good point. When you think of like Friends, there's like 4 locations maybe, so they're either in one of the 2 apartments or in the coffee shop. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, and it's always filmed the same way because they have a live studio audience, so they don't have a 360-degree set. So they're limited in like what they can actually do there visually, but also because they have an audience, they're then like playing up all the moments and the reactions.
And there's like unnatural pauses where the audience is laughing and things like that.
Exactly.
Like if you were talking to someone and they'd made a joke and then they just stood there like this, you'd be like, "Are you alright?"
Yeah, it's one of my favourite things when people edit the laugh tracks out of comedies. It just changes the tone so heavily. But yeah, no, I completely get what you're on about. I think it is. I guess there was like budgetary thresholds as well.
Yeah.
On TV shows, and it's because again, like they're made by like a production channel rather than a production company who are then a movie's made and then you sell so many tickets, so you're immediately getting like return on that, and you obviously you get like viewers and stuff for your TV show, and that means ad revenue and everything, but it's not as specific. It's not like you don't pay, every viewer doesn't pay to watch every episode of every show as they're going, so they don't get that instant return. So as a result, you're going to be, if you're producing X amount of shows at the same time to fill up your channel, then you're going to give them all less money, I feel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think another thing, kind of going off of that in terms of like the actors, I think that's changing now, and I think it's maybe because there's a lot of like almost like fluidity between TV and movies now, where there's actors go from acting in movies to TV shows. So like Kate Winslet, for example, Colin Firth, Nicole Kidman as well is another one. She's done quite a few TV shows now. So I think that's really interesting, like that it's kind of gone from that stigma of, oh, you're just a TV actor kind of thing.
Yep.
But then again, that sounds like a weird point, like, oh, can you imagine Nicole Kidman being in a TV show? Like, but I think it's like, along with the actors, I think there's different like writers and even producers and things like that are moving into TV as well, which I think is bringing a little bit of like the kind of more kind of film aesthetic over, a lot more obviously this will be to do with money as well. If you've got a big star, you're going to get more money, so you're going to be able to, the cinematography is going to be better, probably. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have better music and costuming and sets and things like that.
Even locations as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you've got like big names attached to it, not even stars, like writers or show creators and things like that, there's, I don't want to say higher caliber of like, do you know what I mean though? There's going to be people who have more experience potentially in like bigger things, or things that are more aesthetic or artistic and things like that just come into TV. So I think it's a good thing, especially if you've been a TV writer. I feel like it would be different to write for TV than film. So I think getting a little bit of film in there is really interesting. It's like a nice like mashup of the two, and because like we were saying, they're so different, but you can get elements of movies in TV and then like elements of TV into movies. So
I guess it comes down to character setting and things like that, because if you could come on and write, you could come on and write part of a season of a TV series, but you're not necessarily establishing any of the characters or the world, or necessarily like paying any of them off properly. I'm sure you'll have like setups and payoffs and stuff, but you're not going to actually like conclude the story of those characters. Whereas in a movie, you're probably creating everything from the ground up, and fulfilling that sort of journey. So yeah, I guess it would be in theory difficult to jump from TV. You'd only ever done TV, you'd only ever like written other shows to potentially then do your own thing, and have to suddenly do all the work yourself without any support. I would actually kind of say there does seem to almost not, it's not fully flipped, but it does feel like it's kind of flipped a little bit, in that I think actors are almost more attracted to TV now, and I think especially with like the pandemic, and we talked, literally talking last time about the like dominance of Marvel movies and superhero films and stuff. I think actors feel like there's actually now better roles for them on
and that's,
TV shows.
I would argue, the case a lot of the time. It's weird because maybe it's like a flip of what I was just saying. Like maybe there's a lot more scope for like new talent to tell different stories and things like that. That's an interesting point, because then if you, as an actor, I imagine you would go where, like as an established actor, I imagine you would go where the stories are best.
Yep.
So what does it matter to you if it's TV or film?
Exactly. I think Breaking Bad, for instance, is a really big game changer in the sense that obviously it so completely developed its characters, and in a way that you couldn't do over a movie, over the period of a movie, and it was the actors and stuff like that, and that show were so highly praised. And I think that's now kind of what actors see and kind of covet, is they go, okay, well, like there's phenomenal, there's like career worthy, you could just do that show and retire, and you would be remembered as like one of the greatest actors. And I think that's probably the draw, is and I guess it probably is more about, maybe you get more of a spotlight as well, and this is just pure speculation now, but I know that there's a whole thing with, you can be a terrific actor in a terrible film. You're in that, and I mean like your role specifically. You can act the hell out of it. You could elevate the quality of the film every single time you're on screen. You can make a bad thing watchable, but if it makes no money, it can be a career killer. Whereas I don't know if you necessarily get that with TV shows, probably because you have established audiences that again will kind of stick with it a bit more, and and maybe with an outright dud. But I even feel like that's maybe more forgivable than like a box office bomb. So I feel like
even from like logistically, you're going to be more hireable. Like you're not going to be as hireable if you've been in a box office bomb, like one that's cost a studio a fortune. They're going to be hesitant to to ask for you back. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, and I think your performance will maybe get more attention from if you're in a TV show than it would if you're in a film. I guess because again, film is doing so much else. Whereas like if you appear, you guest feature in a TV show for a few episodes and you knock it out of the park, then you're almost like the focus of those episodes.
Yeah.
So that's what people want to talk about. That's like the different element. Those are like the big things. Rather than like movies where like if a character turns up for a little bit in a film, unless again it's like a terrible film and they completely run away with it, you'll be talking about like all aspects of the film in the conversation the way that you wouldn't otherwise.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I guess moving on a little bit, do you have a favourite era of television?
I would cop out and say like right now. Would be nice.
That was my exact answer.
Yep. And I feel like it's pretty much like common knowledge that Game of Thrones like changed the game, literally. Like, and that came out 2011, I think it was. So
11 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so that's been like a good decade where TV has just changed completely, like unrecognizable. And I feel like Game of Thrones. You talk about your brain being fried. God, I can't say it.
We're taking it turns.
Yeah. Obviously, that was such like large scale. There was different. There was a lot of settings. I feel like they did quite a good job in the early seasons of showing you the sheer kind of size of I can't even remember what it's called now.
Westeros.
Westeros, there we go. So you felt like King's Landing was miles away from the north. Do you know what I mean? It did such a good job of that, and there was obviously we spoke about like ensemble cast, and I feel like that it just did such a good job. The settings were great, the cast, the older cast were very good. But yeah, I feel like that kind of changed the game in that it showed people that you can make a very cool looking, very expensive TV show and people are going to watch it. Do you know what I mean? I hadn't, I've read the books now, but I've read the books because of the TV show.
Yeah.
So like I hadn't heard of it before. I feel like I didn't know anyone who'd heard of it before, so I feel like the kind of built-in fan base from the source material would have been smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
When it started. And obviously it spanned for, God, how many years? Like years.
8 years, yeah, finished 2019.
Yeah, like it took over the books. So I feel like that from like we're talking a lot about finances for some reason, but I feel like as someone who would be producing TV shows, you would look at that and think, yes, there's now money to be made in TV, maybe more so than normal.
Yep.
I feel like they're doing such. I feel like TV is just embracing kind of like cinematography and mise-en-scène and things like that to such a great level. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very clearly thought out now. Like we were talking about when TV shows have very harsh, stark lighting. Yeah. That's not the case now. Generally, they're very artistically lit. They're very well lit. There's a lot of like color grading and things going on.
I think one thing I would say is to end on your point of Game of Thrones, and I guess we've mentioned this a lot already, but I think two things happened at the same time. I think Game of Thrones was one of them, and that absolutely did change the game. I think the other thing that happened at the same time was obviously Netflix and streaming services, and I think that as a result, I mean, Game of Thrones was kind of doing it anyway. It was, we're kind of leaning this. We were starting to. I guess the internet is maybe the bigger thing that changed, and I think as a result, they realised, writers and producers and so on realised that they don't have to spoon feed an audience as much. They don't have to, to really make you, to really hold your hand, because like binge watching, I think, is what ultimately changed that. They know that people will watch a season of a show, in like, one sitting basically.
Yeah.
So they know that they can actually have like small details that will pay off like episodes later and expect you to just remember it. They don't have to like touch on it every episode and be like, oh, remember this thing, by the way, this is going to be important at some point, or even like re-establish it every episode in case you missed the last week's, because they now know that people, if they care about a show, they will catch up.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a good point. Like the way that we've to watch TV's obviously has changed, and I feel like it's very nice that TV, like you're talking about, has changed kind of to adapt with that. And there's not generally as much ads or things like that. Obviously, you're watching an entire series in one sitting, and like you're saying, filmmakers know that that's going to happen, so they make allowances for that basically. And then my other points was going to be, obviously there's big amazing actors that go from TV to film, from film to TV. Sorry, another example I had was Anthony Hopkins, who's just amazing in everything he's in. So I feel like I would definitely say now is my favourite era of TV. I feel like it's, especially for people who've studied film, not to be like exclusive, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but like
we just get it.
Yes,
okay,
we
guys.
know we can appreciate it more than you. No, but
TV's ours.
Yeah, but like I feel like it's a lot more fun as a film student, I'd say, to watch it because of all those different elements.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. There's so much to really get out of it now that wasn't there before, wasn't like anywhere near in the level that it is now. So I completely agree. You've mentioned these, a couple times already, but just quickly I wanted to ask, where do you think adverts fit in the economy of like TV shows? That was one of the reasons I kind of wanted to bring up YouTube before, because obviously YouTube it has quite a lot of ads these days.
Yeah, well, when I was thinking about this, I think it's either gonna go one way or another. There's either gonna be no ads, or we're gonna be inundated with ads. Because I'm sure I read somewhere that some streaming services are thinking about putting ads in.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's thinking anymore. I think it's like actually happening.
Like, that's infuriating. Do you know what I mean? That's that thing again where we're talking about, they get you used to binge watching and then they bring out series every week. They get you used to watching without breaks and then they start introducing breaks.
Yep.
I feel like it's definitely, it would have been one or the other, and like you're saying, I feel like we're going to be inundated with ads. And it definitely, it takes away from the viewing. You, especially if it's something like horror or a tense moment in a drama or something, you're so in the moment, and then for it to cut and be a picture of a car, do you know what I mean, driving down the road, that's so jarring, and you're going to be taken out of it. You're probably more likely to pick up your phone, do you know what I mean, and then you're not going to be watching it as closely after that.
Do you think there's any exceptions? Are there any times you feel like ads have actually helped?
Maybe not ads, but like series finales, like the break in between them. I know that's not really ads, but I feel like that works to, obviously, there's nothing better than a cliffhanger, and leaving it at the end of an episode, I feel like it doesn't work quite as well in ads. It does to a certain extent, but you know that it's going to come back in 2 to 3 minutes, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I asked because just a couple of examples that come to mind. The TV show Atlanta did an episode which I actually envy the people that watched that one live, because I just watched it on Disney Plus, and they actually used the ad breaks as like, because they have an episode where it's framed as if like the characters are on like a talk show, and they wrote and filmed like fake ads that just get like increasingly like ludicrous. Like they kind of start off like tame and then they get like increasingly ludicrous. But if you were watching it like live, there was no way to distinguish when like the actual ads had started and ended, and like their ones. So it made it like everyone was like really kind of like really weirded out by it, because they didn't actually know if they were watching real ads or not until like
That's pretty
obviously the
cool. I
Big
like
Lips.
that kind of like weird element of it, like what's the
The
word, like
metatextuality.
inclusive. Yeah,
Yeah,
like it just adds like another layer to like the experience of watching it.
exactly. And another one, just quickly, was French show The Returned. I remember the first episode of that being on Channel 4 and watching it, and they ran French adverts on the ad break. And that was like, that's brilliant because it's
That's
such an
cool.
atmospheric show. It's so like dripping in like atmosphere, and it was just such a great way of like keeping you in the world, and like even though you've like separated from it. So just to kind of round up quickly, and I say quickly, it is a very big question. Where do you think TV might go next? If you have any
Um,
guesses.
I think it will start to focus more on interactive elements.
Okay.
So I feel like we're starting to get there. There was obviously that Black Mirror episode, Bandersnatch, which was interactive. I feel like I feel like someone's gonna take that and run with it. I don't know how it would work, um, but I feel like there's definitely scope to do something there, to do something really cool, something
Yeah.
like I'm saying, more immersive, kind of taking the medium that we know and that we're kind of used to. Obviously, there's changes and stuff, but I think it'd be so cool to take that and then just do something completely different and something
Yeah.
completely new. And I feel like we're probably headed in that direction. Um, but I have no idea the logistics of how you would do it.
Yeah. No,
But that's
I think that's really interesting. Not something I'd really thought about, but I think you're right. I think there is definitely. I feel like it's going to keep pushing. I think it's going to keep evolving, or keep attempting to evolve at least. I think it's going to keep pushing and trying to find new ways of like. I don't think it's going to become irrelevant, but trying to
Yeah.
become new ways of being relevant and
Yeah.
blow
I think
up in the same way that it has.
I think it's definitely going to try and do it quickly as well.
Yeah.
Because the 10 years is not a huge amount of time.
No.
And the fact that it's changed so much in those 10 years, I think they're going to want to keep going with that kind of speed. Now that they've got momentum, I think they're just going to want to.
I think you're absolutely right. It does feel like TV's still evolving, and it's still, and it does feel like that's a deliberate move that they're thinking. Okay, like we need to keep pushing this so that so that people don't kind of, because I guess with movies in the pandemic and people aren't going to the cinema as much, so TV are kind of latching onto that and being like, okay, like we've got them now, we just need to keep them.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, I think you're spot on there. I think it's definitely going to become more experimental. I think maybe it'll play around a bit more with. I mean, we're even kind of seeing it now with like, and it's just because of the pandemic and like time constraints and stuff. But even seeing like parts of seasons drop at different points, and I think Rick and Morty had like an episode that just like they just dropped it out of nowhere after years of like radio silence. I think we'll see more stuff like that. I think we'll see more things where it breaks up a bit more. It does interesting things structurally in terms of its format. Episodes, and you are kind of getting this more and more. Episodes will be different lengths. You might have a show where one episode's 45 minutes and the next is like an hour and 10 minutes, and I think we're going to see more stuff like that, like chapters in a book where you might have like you might have like a 5-minute episode or something, and then you might have like a feature length episode, and it'd be really cool to just kind of, even like ones that are filmed differently and stuff. And I think it's going to become more and more expansive, and I think it's just in that sort of again, just kind of like sustaining the momentum. Best, like you put it best.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's so interesting. I feel like TV's like having its moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it definitely, like we've kind of touched on it before. Like I really like different things, like how they do different things with movies. So yeah, I feel like you made such a good point. Like to see them doing what we know, like. As I said, TV can be quite formulaic. To see them take that and run with it and do something completely different, but still have it within the confines of TV, will be really interesting.
Yeah. I reckon if we do this podcast in 10 years' time, it'd be very interesting to see what we'd have to say then.
Yeah.
Cool. So, on that note, we'll wrap up then. Kathryn, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thank you very much. Very interesting topic. I feel like we could ramble on for another season's worth.
I actually do. Like, I feel like we have just scratched the surface, and like I absolutely loved everything that you brought to this one. So, not that I don't always, but you went in very different directions from what I was expecting and what I'd even thought of. So, thank you for that.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, thank you to those who watched. Cool. We'll see you next time for Kathryn's content episodes.
Yeah.
Until then, take care.
See you
and
later.
Farewell.